Hello, BookTube. I'm here to do the nonfiction book tag. It's an original tag by Sean D. Standfast, a channel I absolutely cannot miss. I have missed some. We're living in crazy times, but I love watching his channel. Must have one of the best book collections in BookTube. And wide-ranging, a lot of interests, some really cool stuff. So, and he tagged me, and I thank him very much. I'm not really doing a lot of tag videos, but this one was so good, I had no choice. So the first question is, what subject or area of nonfiction did you begin with? And I began with two. Like many people, different tracks in my life. Was it history, biography, science, economics, archaeology, anthropology, math, etc., etc.? It was maritime focus for the nonfiction, and that came from a book we had in our house when I was growing up, Gypsy Moth Circles the World by Sir Francis Chichester. And that book just fascinated me. I don't know if anybody else in the family read it. I don't know how it ended up on our very small bookshelf. I grew up in a small hill farm in southern Vermont, a long way from the sea, at least from my perspective, and it dominated my early life in that I spent many years of my adulthood, early part of my life, at sea. So I had a huge impact, and led to me reading a lot of history of exploration, shipbuilding, navigation, these sorts of things. And the other one was this book here, which I do still have. This is Testaments of Time, The Search for Lost Manuscripts and Records by Leo Duell. It's a Knopf book. Absolutely wonderful book. Came out in 1966. It's just what the title says, the adventures of like Tischendorf, Oral Stein, these people who found ancient manuscripts like what I know Jason at Byways and Booklands just discussed. Nag Hammadi. You have Qumran with the Dead Sea Scrolls. You have all the stuff that were found in the caves in Asia. It's just fascinating stuff, and it includes a lot of religion, a lot of archaeology, anthropology, the history of the book. So this book was fascinating and led me down the second track of my life and what I do for a profession now. Was there a specific event, person, or book that set you on the path? So those two books, Gypsy Moth Circles the World by Sir Francis Chichester, and Leo Duell's Testaments of Time, Search for Manuscripts and Records, Lost Manuscripts and Records. So I really, really, really was influenced greatly by both books. Where did you get your first books from to feed your new passion? From a library, borrow from friends, family, or purchasing? Did you have any guidance from anyone? I didn't have any guidance per se. Like I say, I grew up on a small hill farm. We didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have a lot of books. Had plenty of work. Now I'm not kidding there. But that just wasn't our environment. We had a wonderful public library, and it's a Carnegie library. And I would go in there, and I'm sure, even though the memories, I'm closer to six decades than I am 5. I can't remember exactly, but I did get a lot of help from the librarians, I'm sure. And I found what books I could on both subjects. So the library would have been the way, because we didn't have, like I say, we didn't have a lot of books. Number 3, is your first love still the love of your nonfiction reading life, or was it a gateway to other subjects that took over as number 1? I still read a lot of nonfiction about the history of religions, mythology, the history of the book, archaeology, ancient manuscripts. I read a lot, again, on maritime history. So both things have really, in the nonfiction part of my life, maintained their power, maintained their hold. So yeah, I'm still there. I don't have as big a library. I used to have a massive theology library. and I lost it years ago. And I had an incredible archaeology library, and mine is just a shadow of that now. And both things just break my heart. But my nautical library is quite extensive, quite large. So we're still at it. We're still at it. Okay, number 4. Did you pursue any of your interests with formal education at the university level? If so, what level did you finish, and was the experience you had hoped for and expected? Have you made it your profession? I have, twice. So the first track with Sir Francis Chichester, I was in the United States Coast Guard. I was a search and rescue coxswain, heavy weather coxswain. That means I was in self-righting, self-bailing rescue boats in the Pacific Northwest for many years. I served on large cutters. I served as a coxswain or in command of 41-foot patrol boats in the Caribbean. So I did a lot of stuff. I've been at sea for months and months at a time, and focused mostly on search and rescue, and loved it very much. And am a huge fan of the current Coast Guard and the Coast Guard of the past, and rescue service, nautical rescue services overseas. So that part of my life, I did follow up to. I have extensive education in that, and but the second part with this book, The Testaments of Time, I ended up. Now, most of you know I'm a professional librarian. I'm a library director. I've always had a fascination for the history of the book, for manuscripts, for libraries. I have an associate's degree in library technology. I have a bachelor's degree in archaeology. I have a master's degree in the history ancient literature. I have a master's degree in divinity, and I have another master's degree in library and information science. So the second half of my life, this book really, really dominated. It led me down to those things that interest me so much. I've worked in archives, I've worked in museums, and now I serve a small country library, public library, and it's the joy of my life. I love it very much. And so yes, my formal education is more this than the Sir Francis Chichester, although I've done quite a bit with both. So was it what I hoped for or expected? Yes. And every day I feel blessed to do it, and I'm constantly learning. And so number 5, if you have maintained that first interest all your life, do you feel you should have pursued other interests or subjects? I'm not gone yet. Time's not, well, could be over in an hour for all I know. But right now, while I'm living my life, I'm happy where I've gone. I've got a wonderful family. I've got a wonderful career. I've had wonderful experiences in my life. Yeah, there's plenty of other things I could have done that would have been fascinating. No, I think that if I find something and I've got a certain amount of time left, I'll go do it. Why not? You're only around once, right? So let's see, make sure I got here. Are you now a specialist and read only within one area of nonfiction, or do you branch out? I do branch out. I read tons of different kinds of nonfiction, a lot of history, yeah, all sorts of stuff. I love nonfiction. Do you read fiction? I do. If so, what genre do you turn to when you want something lighter or different to read? I read science fiction, a lot of it. Or, well, maybe not a lot compared to what I used to read, but I read it. I do read thrillers. I'll go where the moment takes me. a big fan of something some folks call literary fiction, which I find to be a ludicrous name because it's not accurate for one thing. It's not historically accurate, and it's putting on airs and where they shouldn't be putting on. But I will read fiction of various types. I like historical fiction for the most part. So I love short stories. So let me see here. Let's see. Number 7. If you are a specialist or not, do you prefer academic studies, general works, or scholarly but not overly academic? I like them all. Brian, who was it? Oh, now I've lost my train of thought. Well, anyway, I like them all. I love academic studies. Sean was mentioning that he loves reading excavation reports. And how dry some people would find that. I got the sun hitting the curtains here. It's making a weird color here. But so I love the same thing. I read lots of them. I actually graduated from school in the Soviet Academy of Sciences back then. That'll tell you how old I am. Of lithic use-wear analysis. That the school was in Moldavia, but had the privilege of going to what was then Leningrad and working with stuff, and then Moscow. So I do read very academic stuff, and he's right that you can't get much more academic or dry than some of the archaeology stuff. But I love it just like he does. I do like dense academic texts. Especially when they're dealing with librarianship, history of the book, archaeology, anthropology, which I studied in America. If you're studying archaeology, you probably are in the anthropology department. So I enjoy all that stuff. Okay, let me see. If a book is too general in that same question, I'll try to get back here so the sun isn't making this look weird. If they're too general and I've read 5 general books on the same subject, I may get a little tired of it and may not finish it. And if it's diving in deep, then I'm probably more apt to like it. So most of the time, every once in a while, a general type book will be brilliant, and so I enjoy that too. Number 8, do you collect books in your areas of interest, or do you read and pass the books on and sell or borrow almost exclusively from a library? Well, it may sound weird for a librarian, but I buy my books, and I keep my books. I've lost a massive, I have about 4,000 books now. At one time, I had a similar sized library that was mostly archaeology and theology, history, anthropology, that sort of stuff that was just unbelievable. And it breaks my heart just to think about it. But I still do, and I've reconstituted that library. And the nautical stuff, my maritime library, is actually better than it's ever been. So I do get books from the library occasionally. I love public libraries, obviously. That's my profession. And I do interlibrary loans from academic libraries when I can't find what I want or I could never afford what I want. That does happen. If you do collect, do you prefer hardcover or paperback? If it's available and it's well done, I prefer hardback. It's just like anything else. Why not buy the best and get the best bang for your buck? Do they need to be first editions and in fine condition, or are you happy with the next library copy and or underlining them? I don't always care about first editions. Sometimes I do. Depends on the book. Sometimes I prefer, as Sean himself mentioned, sometimes I prefer a later printing. Could have been updated, could have been corrected, could have newer information. Don't like highlighting in books. I do have an occasional book with some of that in it, but I got the book for such a price that there was no way around it. I don't mind annotations, especially if they're in pencil. An intellectual always reads with a pencil, right? So when you're reading academic stuff, especially if it's not new, a lot of times it'll be annotated in pencil, and that you can learn a lot from. I actually worked with a book that was, it was Jerome, and it was annotated by Melanchthon, who was Martin Luther's cohort. So that book was much more interesting with the annotations than it would have just if it had been just one more volume of Jerome, right? So sometimes it can be fascinating. And there was, I have one book on a history of a publisher that was sent to a person who was a subject of that book, and he's got angry annotations of what they're saying about him, and I wouldn't give that book up for anything. So, yeah, sometimes the annotations can be fascinating. Ex-library, because of my profession, I would almost never have an ex-library book in here. It just wouldn't normally look good. There are exceptions. If I can find an Oxford English Dictionary full set and it's ex-library and I have to pay a certain amount to get it, I would do it in a heartbeat. But they would be very focused. There would be things that I couldn't get any other way. But I would do it if it was the right volume. And you go to some of the great collections in the world, and sometimes the libraries that are stamped in or written in or whatever are a fascinating part of the book's history. So, but for my own personal setup, you won't find many. I think I have one book. I think it's Brian Aldiss' Trillion Year Spree, A History of Science Fiction, that I couldn't find. It's a revised version. That was an ex-library, and I'll have it until I find a copy that's not. Number 9, do you collect exclusively newer publications, or do you enjoy reading writers had to say on your subject in the past as well? I do like what writers, so I'll read in archaeology Sir Flinders Petrie, or I'll read Layard, or I'll read old, I love John Lloyd Stevens, who was not only a travel writer, but wrote, obviously, Mayan archaeology books, or early exploration. I like those things because I think they give you context, and a lot of times they're better writers. Just the way it is. If I read a Victorian scholar about ancient Greece or Rome, a lot of times their understanding of the language, they may not have the most updated archaeology, but their understanding of the language is a lot of times better than what we do now. So it matters what it is, but I tend to really like reading some of those things. Plus, you learn how the field developed, which can be fascinating. And what is the oldest book you have? Either original edition or a reprint of an older work. I have it here. It's in rough shape. I've got to get it fixed. It's been through a lot, and I think even been through a fire. But it's well worth saving, and it's not in that horrible condition. It was a book on, it's called Dr. Bentley's Dissertation on the Fables of Aesop, examined by Charles Boyle, and it's from 1698. It's quite a controversial book. You can see it's had damage. The cover will fall right off, but it can be fixed. And this came out in 1698. Let's see if I can get part of the page here for you without doing any further damage. I think that would be my oldest book, and like I say, I'm going to get the binding fixed. You can see how they try to do this. So this was Charles M. Tainter, Manchester, Connecticut, May 16th, 1881. So I went through a fire. I'm not going to take the front off though. So, and the back is, you can get the binding wasn't with this originally anyway. This is a binding that's added later. So you see how they dropped the word down here? And just, to me, it's fascinating. So it's printed for Thomas Bennett at the Half Moon in St. Paul's Churchyard, 1698. And I keep it separate from everything. Like I say, we're going to spend some money to get it fixed up. If you look at this board, you can see some of the damage. So obviously went through a fire. And yet the inside of it is perfect. There's nothing wrong with the book itself. So I will get it fixed up. So it was a book about a controversy. It was better known as Boyle against Bentley. And this book represents a collective effort it criticized Charles Boyle's edition of Phalaris. So it has, you can look it up on Wikipedia. Let me see what they say here. The best book ever written by any man on the wrong side of a profoundly ignorant. So people got upset about this book. So that is 1698, my oldest. Not by much. I have some that are in better shape. They're only a couple years newer. But this one was found, and I do think that we will get it just in totally rebound. We'll do a nice leather edition. So one of those projects I never get around to. So let me see here. What do we do now? Here, let me get back. What was the most you have ever paid for a book in your main area of interest? Was it new or used? Some of my probably at the most $300 or $400, and almost in that case are usually new. Academic press books can sometimes be pretty pricey. I'm not exactly sure, but yeah, that would probably be about accurate. So then the next thing to do, other than dropping old books, is to tag some folks. Sean tagged a lot of people I would have tagged, but I do have some others here. So I'd like to tag From the Dusty Bookshelf, Ernest Lee Eston, who's been making some great videos lately, Todd the Librarian, let's see, Joseph Francis Burton, Sue's Book Nook, Old Blues Chapter and Verse, Jay Shea, My Reading Life, Mel's Bookland Adventures, and Remembered Reads. So if any of you want to do it, I know, like Sean says, not a lot of people are doing book tags right now, and I understand why. I'm not even doing a lot. But this was fun. This is interesting, and I thank him very much for doing it. So hopefully everyone is well, and we will talk. Thank you, BookTube.